You know the sound, the hoofbeats in the dark, the wind rising, the ground trembling, and then the rider who comes with no face and no mercy. But who was the Headless Horseman before he lost his head? Tonight we follow his trail, through ghost stories and graveyards, through forgotten battles and ancient myths, because the horseman didn't begin in Sleepy Hollow. His story gallops across centuries, across continents, and into the oldest and darkest corners of human belief. Welcome back, Darklings. Let's begin by returning to the tale itself. In a misty glen in the Hudson Valley lies Sleepy Hollow. A drowsy, dreamy influence seems to hang over the land and to pervade the very atmosphere. Some say the place was bewitched long ago, that a spell was cast upon it in forgotten times, and it never quite lifted. Certain it is, the hollow remains under the sway of some old magic, some quiet power that wraps itself around the minds of its people, lulling them into reverie. The air there is thick, not just with fog, but with memory. Stories cling like cobwebs in the trees. And chief among them is the tale of the Headless Horseman. But before the ghost came the man, Ichabod Crane, a lanky, awkward schoolmaster, pale of skin but burning with ambition. A young, flaxen-haired girl quickly caught his eye, Katrina Van Tassel, the only child of a farmer whose wealth was the envy of the valley. To win her hand was to win her inheritance, and Ichabod, who fancied himself clever and cultured, believed himself worthy of both. But there was a rival. Brombones was everything Ichabod was not, broad of shoulder, bold of laugh, and bolder still in his confidence. He too wanted Katrina, but could not lure Ichabod into a fight, so instead he waged war through pranks and trickery. The schoolmaster's superstitious nature made him easy prey. Strange noises outside the schoolhouse, mysterious howls in the woods, twigs tapping his windows like ghostly fingers in the night. Still, Ichabod pressed on, convinced that charm and education would win the day. Then came the harvest party. A golden October evening at the Van Tassel estate. The tables groaned with food, fiddles sang, laughter danced among the lanterns, and Ichabod, well practised in flattery and genteel manners, charmed his way through the crowd. But as night fell and shadows lengthened, the merriment gave way to darker fare. Stories were shared by firelight, tales of witches, goblins, and one ghost above them all, the Headless Horseman. A Hessian trooper, the tale went, struck down by cannon fire during the Revolutionary War. His body laid to rest in the churchyard, but his head never found. Now he rides by night, galloping through the woods, searching for his missing head. But there was hope, the elders said. He could not cross the bridge near the old church. The water beneath it, they believed, held back his curse. Ichabod, pale and wide-eyed, laughed nervously with the others. But the stories burrowed deep into his mind like roots through soft earth. He stayed behind after the revels, hoping to speak with Katrina, to ask for her hand in marriage. No one knows what passed between them, only that when Ichabod mounted his borrowed plough horse Gunpowder for the journey home, his face was a mask of defeat. The path wound through fields and into the dense woods. The moon was pale above, and the air cold with the scent of fallen leaves. Every creak of branch became a whisper, every rustle a footstep. Then came the sound of hooves, not Gunpowder's, another horse behind him, heavy, relentless, gaining. Ichabod turned, and there, emerging from the gloom, a rider cloaked in black, massive atop a black steed, headless, with a round shape resting beneath one arm, something pale and smooth, like a carved gourd. Ichabod kicked Gunpowder into a frantic gallop. Trees whipped past. The forest twisted like a bad dream. Then he saw it. The bridge, the one place the ghost could not follow. He leaned forward, almost there. The hoofbeats thundered behind him. Ichabod turned and saw the rider rise in his stirrups and hurl the thing in his hand. A terrible crash, followed by eerie silence. By morning, gunpowder was found calmly grazing outside his master's gate, but Ichabod was gone. They found only his trampled hat and a shattered pumpkin. Some said he fled, too ashamed to face the town. Others believed the horseman had taken him, claimed a new head. To this day, no one knows for certain. But the people of Sleepy Hollow still speak of him. They still walk faster past the woods after dark. And when the wind is high and the night is long, they say you can hear a rider in the distance, searching. The legend of Sleepy Hollow has become an iconic ghost story, a Halloween favourite. But what many don't realise is Irving didn't invent the Headless Horseman, he resurrected him. Washington Irving's 1820 story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, gave us an iconic image. A headless rider said to be the ghost of a Hessian soldier decapitated by cannon fire during the Revolutionary War. But that legend wasn't entirely fiction. During the American Revolution, Britain relied heavily on German auxiliary forces, known as Hessians, to bolster its ranks. Renowned for their discipline and martial prowess, the Hessians were feared by American colonists, who saw them as ruthless mercenaries, fighting not for king or country but for coin. In the autumn of 1776, General George Washington's fledgling army, reeling from a crushing defeat at the Battle of Long Island, was in retreat. He ordered his forces to regroup near a small settlement called White Plains, just north of Manhattan. There, on the eve of Halloween, American troops clashed with British and Hessian forces. The Hessians led the charge, eager, aggressive, unrelenting. As battles continued to flicker across the New York countryside, a lone American artillery battery was positioned on a hill above White Plains. According to the journal of General William Heath, a single cannonball was fired at a group of advancing Hessian troops, killing a horse and cleanly decapitating a soldier. Though Washington Irving's story never explicitly mentions the event, the parallels are difficult to ignore. A Hessian soldier, Halloween, and a headless spectre doomed to ride. But Irving was no stranger to ghost stories. He wrote The Legend of Sleepy Hollow while travelling through Europe. And there, among ruined abbeys and mist-drenched villages, he encountered the old world's darker tales. Because the idea of a headless rider didn't begin in America. It had been haunting the folklore of Europe for centuries. In Ireland, they called him the Dullahan, a headless fairy said to ride a great black horse across lonely roads, carrying his own rotting head beneath one arm. Its mouth stretched in a grotesque grin, lined with razor-sharp teeth, while its massive eyes glowed like lanterns. Sometimes he didn't ride alone. Some stories say he drove a black carriage, the Costa Bauer, the silent coach, drawn by headless horses, racing through the night to collect the souls of the dying. The Dullahan was not a ghost to be reasoned with. He was an omen. When he stopped riding, it meant someone nearby was about to die, and in certain tales, even catching his gaze, even looking at him, would strike you blind. But the Dullahan is not alone. Across the Celtic world, headless riders appear again and again. On the Isle of Mull, they still speak of Ewan MacLean, the son of a clan chief who was beheaded in battle by a rival clansman. Since that day, Ewan's ghost is said to ride headless through the island's moors and glens, and the sound of his hooves is an ill omen for any MacLean who hears it, a warning from the other side. In Wales, the phantom takes a different form, Venw heb un pen, the woman without a head, a silent spectral figure riding a headless horse, her presence said to bring misfortune or madness to those who see her. But these weren't just ghost stories, they were echoes of something older. Some say the headless riders of Celtic myth were born from an ancient god, one who demanded heads of his own. Across Celtic archaeology, there's compelling evidence of what scholars call a cult of the head. Skulls displayed in shrines, decapitated trophies, stone carvings of gods gripping severed heads. Some believe these practices may reach back to Crum Cruach, a fearsome fertility god once worshipped in pre-Christian Ireland. Though the records are fragmentary, early texts suggest he was honoured with blood, and perhaps with heads. Although Crum's idol was said to be cast down by St. Patrick himself, some whisper that his shadow lives on, reimagined in the headless riders who still haunt Celtic legend. But not all headless riders are vengeful. In India there is Jinjar, a headless Rajput warrior who died defending his people. He now rides the night to protect travellers. Locals say that if you carry indigo dye, he won't harm you. Some believe it's because indigo, the sacred colour of the warrior caste, wards off evil spirits. Others say it reminds him of his banner, and that he spares those who still bear his colour. He'll simply nod and ride on. But the theme of decapitation isn't just limited to ghost stories. It runs deeper, into ancient literature itself. One of the oldest examples comes from 8th century Ireland, in a tale known as Brickrew's Feast. In it, a giant challenges 3 heroes of Ulster to a gruesome test of courage. He will allow one of them to behead him now, but on the following night he will return the favour. 2 of the heroes flee, but one keeps his word and returns to face his fate. The giant raises his axe and then spares him, declaring that his bravery and honour have made him the undisputed champion of Ulster. Centuries later, the same pattern re-emerges in Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, a medieval English tale with unmistakably Celtic roots. The story is nearly identical, though more elaborate. Here the giant is replaced by a fearsome Green Knight, and the hero Sir Gawain. He strikes off the knight's head in one clean blow, only to watch in stunned silence as the Green Knight calmly picks it up and rides away. A year later, true to his promise, Gawain seeks him out to receive the same blow, but once again the knight spares him, declaring him the most blameless and honourable man in all the land. Both tales belong to what scholars call the beheading game, a recurring motif in Celtic mythology and medieval chivalric romance. In these stories, the head, and the taking of it, becomes a ritual of transformation. To face decapitation willingly is to confront death itself, to prove courage, loyalty, and integrity. The beheading game can be interpreted as a symbolic rite of passage, a mechanism by which a hero can pass from adolescence into adulthood. The brothers Grimm themselves recorded 2 tales of Headless Horseman, one from near Dresden and another from Brunswick. The first tells of Hans Jagenteufel, literally, the hunting devil. A woman gathering acorns in the woods hears the distant sound of a hunting horn. When she turns, she finds herself face to face with a rider in a grey coat, mounted on a grey horse, and carrying his own severed head. He warns her not to take what is not hers, lest she end up like him, a spirit cursed to wander the earth, paying for his greed in life. In another tale, travellers speak of a headless wild huntsman who blows a ghostly horn to warn others not to ride the next day. Those who ignore the warning meet swift misfortune, and those who actually see him are already doomed. And for those who look closely, these German riders echo something far older, a legend that thunders across the night skies of northern Europe: the Wild Hunt. The Wild Hunt is one of the oldest and most widespread legends in northern Europe, found across Germanic, Norse, and even Anglo-Saxon traditions. It tells of a phantom procession of ghostly riders and hounds, led by a mysterious, often terrifying figure, sweeping through the sky or across the countryside. Its followers, the spirit riders and howling hounds, are said to be the souls of the unbaptized, the restless dead, or those who died violently. In some versions, the leader is Odin, the Norse god of war and the dead, riding his 8-legged horse, Sleipnir, and gathering the souls of fallen warriors. In Welsh tradition, the hunt belongs to Gwyn ap Neath, ruler of the Otherworld, astride a demon horse and followed by his spectral pack, the Cún a Nún, the hounds of hell. His hunt rides not through the heavens, but through the hollow hills, the unseen realm of the dead. Wherever it appears, the hunt is a bad omen, a warning of plague, war, or death. To hear its horns, or glimpse its riders racing through the storm, was to invite disaster, or to mark yourself for death within the year. In some retellings, particularly in Germany, the hunt's leader, or one of his riders, is said to ride without a head. In 1778, German poet Gottfried August Berger wrote a ballad called Der wilde Jäger. It retells the old wild hunt legend as a Christian morality tale. A cruel nobleman obsessed with hunting rides on Sundays instead of attending church. For his arrogance, he's cursed by God to hunt forever, pursued by demons and hounds until the end of time. Sir Walter Scott translated Berger's poem into English in 1796, calling it The Chase. This translation was extremely popular in Britain and America. It introduced the wild huntsman legend to English-speaking readers for the first time. When Washington Irving travelled to England in 1817, he met Sir Walter Scott in person. Scott introduced him to European folklore and ghost stories, and the chase was almost certainly among them. Only 3 years later, in 1820, Washington Irving published The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, centered around a restless ghost doomed to search for its head for eternity. But in history, decapitation seemed to have the opposite effect. Archaeologists across England, Ireland, and Scandinavia have uncovered burials where the head was removed and placed between the legs, turned face down, or pinned with stones. These weren't accidents or oddities. They were apotropaic burials, rituals designed to stop a corpse from walking. The old word for such a being was revenant, the one who returns, and removing the head was the surest way to stop that from happening. The same logic later bled into vampire folklore. In parts of Eastern and Western Europe, suspected vampires were decapitated, their heads placed between their feet, or stones stuffed into their mouths to silence their hunger. Even the horses weren't spared. Headless horse burials have been found too, their skulls removed, sometimes placed elsewhere as offerings. To the people of the Iron Age, the horse was sacred, a creature of power and passage between worlds. Removing its head may have released its spirit, or bound it to follow its rider into the next life, and perhaps that's where the image truly begins, rider and horse both decapitated, yet still riding through the dark. But what if the headless weren't ghosts at all, but an ancient race said to walk the earth long before these stories began? The Greeks called them acephaloi, the headless ones. To the Romans, they were blemmies, strange, human-like beings with no heads upon their shoulders, their faces set instead upon their chests, and they were believed to be real. The historian Herodotus placed them in Libya, beyond the edges of the known map. Pliny the Elder listed them among the monstrous races said to inhabit distant lands, people without heads, yet with eyes and mouths in their torsos, living peacefully along the Upper Nile. Even medieval cartographers repeated the claim. Their maps of the world show Africa and India teeming with wonders. Dog-headed men, one-footed giants, and among them, the headless people. Bizarre as it sounds, these headless folk weren't fantasy to them, but fact. But the image of the headless body, the face moved to the chest, wasn't unique to Greece or Rome. It appears again and again scattered across the world. In India's Ramayana, there is Kabanda, a headless demon, his face sunken into his belly, cursed to wander the forests until the hero Rama releases him. When Kabanda's true form is restored, he ascends to heaven, redeemed through decapitation. In China, the warrior god Xingtian defied the supreme deity and was beheaded for his rebellion, but even without a head, he refused to fall. Eyes blossomed upon his chest, a mouth opened in his belly, and he continued to fight, a defiant symbol of unbroken will. In Japan, the tale echoes once more. The Donotsura, grotesque spirits with faces upon their torsos, wander the mountains, terrifying travellers and mocking the living. Folklorists have long puzzled over this recurring image. Why so many cultures imagined beings with faces in their chests? Some believe it reflects an ancient fear or fascination with the head as the seat of power, identity, and divine energy. And when that vessel is removed, what's left is never quite human. And in some stories, the severed head still holds power over the living. In Greek myth, when Perseus severed the head of Medusa, her face did not die. Even in death, her gaze could turn men to stone. Her head became an object of awe and terror. And from the wound of her neck, a horse was born, Pegasus, the winged steed. It was as if decapitation had opened a gateway between worlds, the mortal undone, the divine set free. Even in Mesopotamia, the same idea reappears. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest stories ever written, the hero and his companion Enkidu venture into the sacred cedar forest to confront the guardian demon Humbaba. They slay him by decapitation, and it is with his final breaths that Humbaba curses them. Some interpretations suggest his severed head continued to speak its curse even after death. Archaeological evidence shows that images of Humbaba's severed head were a popular motif in ancient Mesopotamia. Terracotta plaques depicting his monstrous staring face were used as protective charms, believed to ward off evil. Yet in other ancient lands the story changed. The head no longer shielded the living, it doomed the dead. The ancient Egyptians believed that the body was a vessel the soul needed to recognize and return to after death. Without a complete and intact body, the soul, or Ka, might become lost, unable to reunite with the self in the afterlife. And it was the head, the face, that anchored identity itself. To lose it was to be spiritually erased forever. In the coffin texts and Book of the Dead, spells were written to guard against this fate, rituals to restore the head to the deceased so they might speak and breathe again in the afterlife. The dead were sometimes called the Headless Ones, beings cut off from the divine order, wandering in darkness, unable to cross into the field of reeds. Across the ocean in the temples of Mesoamerica, decapitation held deep symbolic meaning. In both Aztec and Maya culture, it was tied to warfare, ritual, and the creation of the world itself. Maya myths tell how the hero twins defeated the lords of death through decapitation, restoring life to their father, the maize god. Ritual sacrifices reenacted this story, the severed head symbolizing death that feeds rebirth. Even the sacred Maya ball game carried the same belief. The losing side was sometimes sacrificed and decapitated, echoing the cosmic battle between life and death, sun and darkness. Meanwhile, among the Sumerians, Babylonians, and Assyrians, death held no peace at all. The afterlife was a shadowed underworld where ghosts ate clay in a world of dust, and of all the restless spirits that haunted the living, none were feared more than the ghost of one whose head was lost. In clay tablets inscribed with cuneiform, the world's oldest writing, priests recorded spells for banishing these spirits. They described them as wailing, hungry shades, cut off from rest because their bodies had not been buried whole. A man slain in war and left decapitated might rise again, his spirit unable to enter the underworld, condemned to linger among the living. To stop such hauntings, ancient Assyrians practiced skull burials, collecting and interring severed heads to quiet the souls attached to them. Yet not every head was feared. In Mesopotamia, many families buried generations of their dead beneath the floors of their homes, an act of ancestor veneration, believed to bring spiritual protection to the household. It's possible this tradition was a faint echo of something far older, a practice that began thousands of years before the first cities rose from the plains. Across the Fertile Crescent, from modern Turkey to the Levant, early farming communities treated the head with special reverence. Around 9,000 years ago, skulls were removed, coated in plaster, painted, and inlaid with shells for eyes, the faces of the dead remade to watch over the living. These plastered skulls are among humanity's earliest portraits, thought to have been displayed in family homes so that the ancestors could remain present, perhaps to guide or protect. When their purpose was fulfilled, the skulls were respectfully buried together, later rediscovered by archaeologists, like the famous plastered skull of Jericho. From these Neolithic shrines to the ghostly riders of legend, one truth endures: for as long as we've told stories, the head has held power as the vessel of spirit, identity, and memory, and remains the most haunting thing to lose. And if you think the Headless Horseman is strange, wait until you hear what people used to do for Halloween. From cabbage divination to the tale of Stingy Jack, the forgotten rituals of All Hallows Eve might just surprise you. Click here to watch it now. See you in a future video.